So I was in Nauru 2012 to 2014, and I think that would have been 2018. So at that point, like, it was a tragedy for me looking at it, because I worked with a lot of teenage boys that had arrived by themselves as teenagers without a parent or a guardian. So they were, unaccompanied minors stuck there. But the real tragedy for me in that 2018 time is that none of them were children anymore. They had all lost the rest of their childhood to that place.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations. As some of you will have seen, I delayed this episode by a week just to give myself some space, as it's been a bit crazy of late, and I figure we can't really help to bring a bit of heaven down to earth if we run ourselves into the ground, can we? But we're back, and I'm super pumped to bring you this episode. James Harris is passionate about people, and he's given his life to helping those less privileged than himself. This has led him around the world to a number of places that many of us would never even dream of going. We talk about his passion for youth work, justice, and doing good in the world, and we hear how this is outworked while living and working in Nauru, with those in Australian detention centres, influencing the Prime Minister of New Zealand while working for World Vision New Zealand, and now serving youth in the outback of the land we now call Australia. It's a bit of a longer conversation, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. This conversation blew my mind and melted my heart. This is episode 33 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's James Harris. I'm here today with James Harris. Kia ora, James.
Yeah, kia ora, Andy. It's cool to be on the podcast.
For those who don't know you, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you are now, so we can get to know you a bit?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm a proud West Aucklander. So West Auckland is very much home, but God and the pursuit of justice has sort of taken me all over the place since growing up in West Auckland. So currently I'm based in Western Australia in a remote Aboriginal community with my wife. Yeah, it's hard to explain who am I, what am I.
Yeah, that's what I just asked you. I just asked you to unpack your life in like 30 seconds, so it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the big things that I am super passionate about is young people. So I've done a whole load of youth work over the years. That's what I'm doing now. So I also do a little bit of youth work training with a thing called youthwork.io. But have really been involved with a whole lot around justice throughout the years. So as I've delved deeper into my Christian faith, I feel like I've been pushed further towards the pursuit of justice, further towards friendship with people that are on the margins. And while I'm there, have seen the structures that are affecting those people, and then really gone, actually, we need to be pushing for more justice alongside these people. So, that's sort of my
cool.
jam, I guess.
Yeah, and like you said, you grew up in West Auckland. What was it that kind of gave you that first taste of there's this other world out there, or there are these people that need people to walk with them, to fight for them, to fight with them? What was it that sort of triggered that passion for you?
Yeah, there's a whole range of stuff. It's funny looking back, growing up in West Auckland. Like, I had a really, I feel like I still live like a really privileged life. But looking at so many of my friends and people around me, like, I remember just going, like, there's this kid at school that we used to play soccer with that had like bullet holes in the back of his legs, like, and he'd come as a refugee, and everyone played soccer with him at lunchtime. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. And then as an adult, I was like working with refugees, and I was like, holy shit, I don't know, there were just things that they didn't hit me at the time, but looking back on it, I'm like, oh, there was all this stuff that I didn't have the eyes to see, I guess, as a 12 or 13 year old. But there are a few things that really sort of open my eyes, I guess. And I do feel that a part of it was like God doing a work in me, because really, as a teenager, I was just your average teenager. I was really interested in music, like I loved music, and so I think that was a big part of it. That I was really into punk and hardcore, and so on a Sunday, I'd be going to church and hearing sermons about you know, your average sermon, but at the same time, like I remember listening to bands. I would have been 13 when the US invaded Iraq,
Right.
and so at church as a 13-year-old at church would be, at Sunday school, still getting whatever they do for 13-year-olds, sort
Yeah.
of Sunday school stories. But then I'd be reading the liner notes of bands that were talking about the war in Iraq, about the history of that, which I didn't fully grasp at the time,
Yeah.
but it made me go, "Oh, there's more going on in the world." So I actually do credit punk music in some ways
Yeah.
for opening my eyes, but it wasn't until later on as a teenager that those things really converged, and I think that that heart for God and the heart for justice, going, oh, these are
Yeah.
one, and that really becoming like a lifelong trajectory for me. So
That's fascinating about the music side of things, because a big part of some of the episodes that I've been on already are talking about artists, and the power that there is in art
mm,
to shape lives, and to hear that there's these people who put this stuff out there, I guess just their emotions and what they were feeling, to know that
yeah,
impacted some little teenager on the other side of the world, that's pretty major.
totally. And the interesting thing with it, I've actually been trying to unpack this recently, because I've felt challenged to listen to more Christian music, and I mostly don't like
Yeah.
it. And a
Yeah.
part of it, was like listening to like punk and hardcore, all this heavy music that was like, we're talking about what's actually going on in the world. We're having like a really serious conversation about what is my place in the world, and what am I going to do about all this stuff. But then I was like, oh, but I'm listening to all these like secular bands, so I should listen to some Christian rip-offs of the same thing,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And they just said the same thing I was hearing at church on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So I was drawn. I loved going to church on a Sunday. Like, what was being said wasn't bad, but then I'd go to a hardcore show on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and I'd be challenged about my consumer habits. I would be
Yeah.
challenged about where my shoes had come from. I'd be challenged about my diet and the impact of it on the planet. All these things that I had never once heard of really in church. And more and more now, I think people are having the justice conversation. I think that's really
Yeah.
good. But for me, the thing that brought those together really was the two worlds, was like
Yeah.
punk and hardcore and church. But the thing that sort of brought them together was at my youth group was amazing. It was a really, really good youth group. And we started talking a lot about, the kingdom of God and the whole, it's already but not yet. So, in the kingdom, there's no sickness. So let's pray for healing. And if someone gets healed, that's awesome. Like, praise God. But if that doesn't happen, it's all right. The kingdom's not yet. It's not your faith. It's not your faith is lacking. Like, I think it was a really solid
Yeah.
theology around healing. But me and a bunch of the other young people that were like listening to punk music, starting to go, well, there's a big wide world out there, going, well, in the kingdom, there's no poverty.
Yeah.
And like, we're not just going to pray it away.
Yeah.
Like, we got to do something about it. And so I think the solid kingdom theology that in that church was mostly being talked about in terms of healing and things like that really started, when I started actually looking at what was going on in the world and going, well, I'm not going to pray the poverty away.
Yeah.
led me to go, okay, well, what am I going to do about it? And so I think that really sent me down a path. And I think so. I sort of fell into youth work, and I really love youth work. I think I'll be a youth worker in some form for the rest of my life. And the thing I found with youth work is, which I think is really important to me, is that thing of, okay, well, it's one thing to do something for some people, say, with getting my hands dirty about poverty. It's like, okay, well, let's raise some money to send to people, or, let's look at the macro structures that are affecting people, all those sorts of things. But I think you can still do that from behind a pretty comfy white picket fence and never have to interact with anyone that's actually facing any of those issues.
Yeah.
So I think that youth work has been really, really good for me in terms of putting me on the front line in a micro sense and interacting with those people. So, I think it's important. It's become important for me to find what's my micro, what am I doing in my day to day, interacting with people on a smaller level, and then what's the macro stuff that I can impact as well. So to me, like, youth work is an act of justice as well.
Yeah, I guess you've got a whole bunch of youth who have, youth have issues going on for them just like the rest of us. But having someone that they can know and trust and, talk to about these things. And, I know even from, I'm the chair of the board at my kids' school, and just learning about some of the situations that some of these kids come from. It's just different to what I grew up with. It's not a world that I think should ever exist, and yet it does. And so, I just want to toe talk with that youth work is such an amazing gift to those young people, that people to be with them and hear them, and it really does give you that ear to the ground on actually some real life conversations that are happening, because they're not yet
totally
so set in their ways that actually this is how life is. They're going, hey, this is how life is, and what the hell, why is it like that, and what can we do about that, and it shouldn't be like this, and so that's really cool. So I mean, you started obviously volunteering and things, but then ended up working in that kind of space. What was the biggest thing that from those early days that you feel, I guess, encouraged you to know that this was your place?
I think once I started on that path, there are so many, I guess, deeply held values that I have that that come from my faith, and are really anchored in my faith, around justice, around community, around how I spend my time, how I spend my energy, all those things. Like, I think I do have a really strong, set of values that come from my faith. And I have, I guess, my wife that shares the same values. And so for me, so it's interesting, like, as I unpack it, like there's all the stuff that comes from my faith, and then there's an approach to life, I guess, that I've learned growing up around punk and hardcore. Like, the whole thing with that is like, why sign to a record label when you can do it all yourself?
Yeah.
When I was like, the whole kind of DIY, like, stick it to the man ethic. And a big part of that is just like knowing what you believe in and backing yourself.
Yeah.
And so I feel like at quite a young age, I was able to go, oh, this is what I really believe in. This is what I value. And then just like backing that, God has a place for me in that.
Cool.
So it's been less about, like, I guess, the job or what I have been doing, but I've always gone, no matter what, for me and for everyone, I think God has a place I know that God has a place for them in His kingdom, and I know that that kingdom looks like the world the way it ought to be, and in that kingdom there's no injustice. It's not ought to be like that. So sort of by extension, everyone has a place
Yeah.
in making the world right and working towards the world the way it ought to be. And so for me, it was sort of real trust in God, but also this weird kind of DIY. Well, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to make it happen sort of attitude.
Yeah. Cool.
Worked in. I basically fell into youth work straight out of school. So I'm 30 now, so it's been about sort of the last 12 years of either youth work or like my work with World Vision, the work in Nauru, like a bunch of either people facing or justice oriented work.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned those other roles. When I knew of you through your family, but when I first probably met you was a few years ago, and you were working for World Vision at the time, but you'd just come back from Nauru.
Yeah.
And first of all, like, what were you doing there?
Yeah.
It's not a place that most of us go, hey, let's go to Nauru,
Yeah.
But obviously there was something that drew you there.
Yeah.
Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that, and then what it was that you got up to over there?
Yeah. So the background context is that Australia was having people arrive by boat that didn't have visas, that were claiming asylum. So there were people that were saying, hey, we're refugees and we need your protection. And Australia didn't like people coming by boat. So they said, if you arrive by boat, we're going to send you to two other countries. So to Papua New Guinea, to a small little island called Manus Island, and to Nauru, which is the smallest republic besides the Vatican. So it's the whole country is 21 square kilometers. It's this tiny. It takes like 16 minutes to drive around it. I used to walk the whole country on my day off, and so it's this tiny little. It's a half marathon to run around the whole country, but. So Australia said, we're going to send you to these other countries where you'll be processed, whether you're a refugee or not, and you're going to be detained during that time. And after that, you're going to be sent to a third country, and you're never going to make it to Australia. So I, as this little like Kiwi boy from West Auckland, so my wife's Australian. We're living in Melbourne together, about to get married, and my friend was working for the Salvation Army and said, hey, we're just catching up. She said, I've been offered to be seconded to this place. She's another Kiwi, same age as me, going, I have no idea like what it'll be like. I wish I could go, but she couldn't because she had like prior commitments. And so she's almost grieving it with me. Like, I wish I could go and be a part of this thing. And I was like, could I go? And she was like, I could send a couple emails. I didn't work for the Salvation Army, and the Salvation Army had got the welfare contract.
Right.
So the government passed the law on the 12th of August, and people arrived on the 13th of September, so a month later.
Wow.
And I arrived a month after that. So it was all super, super rushed. And I was about to get married and went there on a 3-week contract. They were like, could you just come for 3 weeks? We just need bodies on the ground, people helping out. And I got there, and I remember emailing my wife. It would actually be interesting to go find the email, just for myself. And I was just like, we need to be here. I don't know like how it's going to work, but like we need to be here. And so, so literally then they offered for me to come back. I went back for 8. They said, how long could you come for? I was like, well, I'm getting married in 12 weeks, so I could come for 8. And then while I was there, they said, could you come back permanently? And I was like, could you hire my wife as well? And, so that ended up being like our honeymoon, essentially, as we spent 2 years there working with refugees who are and asylum seekers being held in detention. So the whole thing was a really, really, really horrific, to be honest. Like I've seen some really horrible stuff in my life, and that's some of the worst stuff I've ever seen was all there. at the hands of the Australian government. And yeah, so it was a real privilege and an honour to be there with those people because they were such incredible. The asylum seekers and refugees are the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. But then just such an injustice that they're being held. It's indefinite detention. So I some of the people that arrived there in 2013 are still there, and we're talking now in 2021. So
Wow.
it's horrific, and there's no end in sight for a lot of them. It's hectic. It's horrible. Um, in terms of like looking at it as a Christian, like I'm like it's sinful.
Yeah.
It's evil. Yeah,
I'm guessing that the quality of life there, they were being detained. It wasn't like hotel-like experience.
yeah. So while I was there, things have changed since. Like it's slightly better for the people that are there, but conditions wise, so Nauru is 21 square kilometers, tiny little island, and as we know, every country in the Pacific was colonized except for Tonga, which kind of had its own other thing happen. But when Nauru was being colonized by several different people, they realized that it had the highest grade phosphate in the world. Basically, Nauru, over millions of years, birds were flying over the ocean and shat on it. And
Right.
then that bird poo over time created like this giant island of their feces,
Yeah.
which so like it's this amazing phosphate. And the really sad history of Nauru is that they mined basically the whole island. The whole middle of the island is mined out, and Nauru gained independence in 1967. So then they became the wealthiest country per capita. It was kind of like Dubai for about 20 years, or like, UAE for like 20 years. And then there was a lot of corruption and dodgy investments, and the bottom end of the economy fell out overnight. So it's kind of this like riches to rags sort of story as a
Well,
country. And so now they have all these like schemes going to make money. For a while, they were laundering money for Hezbollah and the Russian mafia and things. And
right.
the UN stepped in and said, like, your prime moneymaker as a nation can't be money laundering. And so soon after that, they started locking up refugees. So that it's the majority of their GDP, which is, the sad
Wow.
thing that,
Yeah.
but so the middle of the island is the mine, and it's like completely barren. Like it's like being in a quarry.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the mine is the detention. Well, there's two detention centers in the middle of the mine. So when I was there, it was people living in canvas tents in the middle of a mine. And because it was dug out like a quarry, like there's no air getting in, you're on the equator, so it's like 40 degrees. But the biggest thing really was like the indefiniteness of it.
Yeah.
Like at least if someone was like, "Hey," well, the part of the problem is they didn't break any law arriving. Like they didn't follow, in terms of the law, seeking asylum, no matter how you arrived, is always your legal right in Australia, and
Yeah.
the same in New Zealand. And you can't discriminate on mode of transport or anything like that. But they didn't follow the lawful process of applying for a visa, which they wouldn't have got. But they haven't broken a law. They haven't committed a crime. But people are like, just give me 10 years. Like, give me a 10-year prison sentence for arriving by boat. Then give me refugee status and resettle me. But at least tell
Yeah.
me how long I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
And I think the indefinite nature of it, like just being stuck in limbo is the thing that really, really gets to people. So I think that's that one, the worst thing, even if the conditions are great. It's like if someone was in a COVID lockdown in their house and they had a really great house, but people are like, this lockdown could last years. and you never know if you're going to be able to leave your house again. It's like, well, the standard of living in the house at a certain point, like, isn't even a part of
It's
the
not the
equation
issue.
of whether
Yeah.
this is good or not. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So the standard of living was really bad, and I think it's gotten better over time. Like, a lot of people actually are free to roam around the island now and live in small houses on the island, but um, they're still indefinitely detained,
mm.
essentially. So yeah, that's the thing that's really, really hard.
So what gave you hope while you were there?
The people themselves were just so incredible. Like, people are made in the image of God, and I think when you are put in a place where life is really tough for you, the image of God often shines its brightest, I think.
Mm,
And so for me there, it was just like um, seeing the image of God in these people, and seeing their beauty and their resilience. Um, yeah, so I had a job where I was supposed to do um, a whole load of work to essentially try make life a lot less hard for these people,
mm.
which was this weird paradox that the Salvation Army were employed by the Australian government to provide welfare services for people in detention, but the detention was the thing that was making them unwell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
it was just a bit of a weird. It's like being a doctor at a hospital where the hospital makes people sick.
Yeah.
You know, it was just
Yeah.
like a bit of a weird. So I realized real early on, literally in my first few weeks, nothing I do in my job is going to help. But I'm in a place that is stripping people of their dignity, and I can spend all my day doing everything I can to at least give a little bit of it back. So I
Mm,
basically dedicated myself to drinking cups of tea and playing games of chess. Like, um, that was my day. I'd try get all my like tasks done for my job by about 10 a.m., and then I knew I could spend um,
mm.
from 10 to I finished at 6. Um, I could spend, the next 8 hours just having cups of tea, you know, mourning with those who mourn.
Yeah.
When things were good, rejoicing with those who are rejoicing, learning little bits of their language,
Yeah.
learning little bits about their culture, all those sorts of things. And like, I've never played that much chess in my life. Like, we
Yeah.
played a lot of chess.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that was the thing that kept me there for that amount of time, was knowing that the job itself wasn't necessarily helping, but in a system that was stripping people of their dignity, I could do the little bit that I could to bring some dignity in that moment, which to me is a kingdom thing. It's that, like, down to earth, bringing the kingdom down to earth in a situation like that. How can
Yeah.
I bring at least a little bit of the kingdom? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what gave me hope.
I remember there was a thing around the Pacific leaders all gathering in Nauru, and
Mm.
was that when you were there still, or had you come back by then?
Yeah, so that was to me, that was fun, a fun time. So, in a weird way, as someone that
Yeah.
had been, so I was in Nauru 2012 to 2014, and I think that would have been 2018.
Right.
So at that point, like, it was a tragedy for me looking at it, because I worked with towards the end of my time there, I worked with a lot of teenage boys that had arrived by themselves as teenagers without a parent or a guardian. So
Wow.
they were, unaccompanied minors stuck there. But the real tragedy for me in that 2018 time is that none of them were children anymore. They had all lost
Yeah.
um, the, they're all early 20s, and
Yeah.
they'd essentially lost the rest of their childhood to that
Yeah.
place. But yeah, there was a bit of so I was working for World Vision at the time, and there was about to be a push by World Vision Australia on getting all the kids off Nauru. So at the time, there was 119 children. So 100, that being people under 18,
Yeah.
119 people under 18. including teenagers, but also including babies that have been born there. So they knew nothing but detention. And so World Vision Australia got in touch with World Vision New Zealand and said, hey, we just wanted to let you know this campaign's happening if you wanted to be a part of it, if there's anything you wanted to do. And so the advocacy manager got in touch with me because I was there, and he's like, hey, is there anything you thought we could do? And I happened to go to church with someone that was involved with the Pacific Islands Forum. So every year, all of the leaders of the Pacific come together on, one of the Pacific Islands and talk, including Australia and New Zealand, and talk about what's happening in the region, how we can support each other, all sorts of different things. But this year it was being hosted in Nauru. So it was kind of in my mind early on that this thing was going to happen in Nauru. So it was already bubbling away. And then World Vision Australia were like, hey, is there anything you want to do? And we had a big hunch that Jacinda Ardern would be going. And so we thought, okay, well, if the call from World Vision Australia is to get all of the kids off Nauru and Australia is saying we won't take them, then let's get Jacinda Ardern to go to Nauru and say we'll take them. She's going to be there. And so we reached out to her, called her office, sent some letters, didn't hear anything. And so then we thought, okay, well then let's make a push. So 2 weeks out from the forum, we gathered a whole load of people around the country. We asked them all to gather 10 friends. We had, so another part of the history is people were sent to Nauru a long time ago, sort of like a lot earlier. I think it was around 2008. And there were people that had gone to Nauru as children that Helen Clark said, no, we'll take them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Kiwis that arrived on what's called the Tampa boat.
That's right. That
have grown into sort of proud Kiwis. So we had a guy, Abbas Nazari, who was one of those guys say, we've done this before. We did it for me. I'm now a proud Kiwi. Now's our time. We need to do this again. Jacinda Ardern while you're there. So we put this video up and we'd organized in the background. So we'd organized 30 people that had 10 friends to share the video straight away. So the video went up on a Sunday night and it got 300 shares within the first minute. And then that sort of almost tried to reverse engineer a viral video. And then after that, I'd been having coffee with a friend who does marketing, and we're talking about the campaign, and we're like, what could we do? And I think it was him or I, or it was just, when something comes up in conversation and you're like, this is the idea, you're kind of that ping pong back and forth and you land on something and you're like, this is it. And we're like, how businesses embed their Facebook Messenger box on their website where it's like, send us a message on their website directly through Messenger. We were like, we reckon we could embed Jacinda Ardern's Facebook Messenger onto our own website. Like we just like Googled the code and we're like, you can do that. You can just embed anyone's Messenger on your Facebook, on your website. So we basically led everyone from the video to our website with a whole bunch of information, asked them to message Jacinda. And so that happened Sunday night. And then by about midday, she called us up and she was like, her office called us up and said, hey, call off the dogs, essentially, like let's meet in 2 days. And what happened next, I think, was the best. Is there was a whole load of articles. And so Jacinda Ardern was having this press conference to talk about, at that point, she was saying, the big news of the day from her was that they were freezing the MPs' wages, that there wouldn't be increases for the next however long. And so people then went to question and answer, and people started asking, hey, World Vision is saying that there are 119 children in detention and that you're going to be going over there. We want to know whether you're going to answer their call about, will New Zealand bring these kids from Nauru? And then one question was, will you visit the refugee detention centres while you're there? And she said, I don't know if I'll be able to. And they had a follow-up question saying, is it that you won't be able to or that you're not allowed to? And she said,
Wow.
as the leader of New Zealand, I have the hope and expectation that I would be able to visit the detention centres. And one of the really crazy things at this point, which to me at the time, this was one of the biggest wins, was Jacinda Ardern was saying, I think that, I have the expectation that I would be able to visit. And it got announced a few days later, not even announced, it got leaked to the media a few days later that they had completely dismantled what was left of the detention centre. So people were at that point still living in these tents, and they were having severe health problems from mold in them. They moved from having canvas tents to the sort of that white plasticky material that you have at like an Easter camp, big tent, or like parachute, those sorts of festival sort of
big marquee thing.
And so they just got super moldy, and people were getting like really, really sick. And so I think with the spotlight on Nauru and the potential of Jacinda Ardern visiting, even the thought of it, they dismantled what was left of those tents. They moved them completely out of sight, and they moved everyone else that was there into the community to sort of live with a bit more freedom. So to me, I was like, I spent every day in that oppressive place, and to see us sort of rally around and as a result have the detention centre dismantled was really, really cool. And the end result of the campaign, which took a while, is all 119 children got removed from the country. So all of them with their families are now in Australia. They still face a lot of legal battles and challenges, and there's still the indefiniteness of not knowing if they can stay in Australia, but it's such a huge step forward. So it was amazing to be a part of, to come full circle from having been there, and it was really powerful for me to be able to campaign for kids that I knew by name, that I had spent so much time with, and like it wasn't a faceless campaign for me. It was really personal, and so to see the fallout of it gave me great joy. That's where you asked a question that that week where the campaign was in full swing. There was all sorts of things. There was a New Zealand reporter that reporters were allowed on Nauru for the first time in like 5 years. So the country, it was a $10,000 visa to apply to go as a reporter, and if it was non-refundable, even if you were denied, and they just denied everyone, denied. So no reporters. People are like the Guardian was spending like over $100,000 to try get reporters there, just always denied. The only time they ever let reporters were like far right-wing reporters from Australia every once in a while, just to say, yeah, we let reporters in, with, people that were going to toe the party line. And so for the first time in years, reporters were going for the Pacific Islands Forum, and they signed something to say that they would never leave essentially the press bus. They wouldn't talk to any refugees. They wouldn't talk to anyone about anything refugee related, all this stuff. And there was this New Zealand reporter who was like, who'd already been arrested in Fiji another time for something else. She's been reporting on what's happening in the Pacific Islands for a long time. And she was like, I want to get away. So we actually, behind the scenes, teed her up with refugees to meet up with. And she escaped secretly from all of the press and made her way around the island and interviewed a whole bunch of refugees.
Wow.
And ended up getting arrested by the Nauruan police. So that became like the whole first half hour of One News was dedicated to their reporter who was locked up, and they confiscated heaps of the footage, but she knew it was going to happen, so she had been sending it off as they went, so they already had a lot of the footage. And to me, as this like punk that's like been there, that doesn't want to just stick it to the system for the sake of it, but is like there's a huge injustice happening right now. This reporter that we had just helped have have these interviews happen just gave me great joy. Like it was in this
Yeah.
weird way.
Yeah.
Like literally, we received WhatsApp messages from the refugees saying, "Hey, that reporter was just arrested."
Wow.
So One News didn't even know. Like
Wow.
we were calling One News, like, "Hey, do you know? Do you know that your reporter's just been arrested?" So yeah, it was just a crazy time. It was one of the best weeks of my life, to
Yeah.
be honest. Just coming full circle.
That's really cool too about how the like you talked earlier about the DIY kind of nature of the music that you're listening to, and the that inspired you, and
Mm,
and to go, hey, we could reverse engineer a viral video. um, you know,
yeah,
let's just do it, and
yeah,
actually to have that not just be something that goes viral and then you get famous from it, but something that
mm,
really makes a difference in the world. That must be just so heartening to
yeah,
go, well, actually, I'm just an ordinary guy doing ordinary stuff, but it made a difference.
yeah, yeah.
How did you then go from, like, you're working for World Vision, you're now over in Australia
Mm,
in the Outbacks?
yeah.
How did that transition happen?
Yeah. So yeah, I'd been working for World Vision New Zealand, and then I got offered to go work for World Vision Jordan. So I was in Jordan for like they're like, we need someone for 6 months who can do work with young people.
Yeah.
It was working with local staff to work with young people, but youth programming that was all about advocacy. And
Yeah, cool.
so people were like, oh well, James is like youth work and advocacy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was there for 6 months with World Vision. It was always just going to be a 6 month contract, and at the end, so my wife joined me over there, and we both, because she was in Nauru together, so we were both already had like started learning Arabic. We had a real passion for the region. So a part of us going there for that 6 months was going, oh, maybe we'll be here for a while. We're not sure, but maybe. So that 6 months ended with World Vision, and both of us were sort of applying for a few like jobs and stuff here or there, but mostly just trying to find our place
Yeah.
in Jordan and hanging out with people, and a bit of travel as well from there. And we got offered these jobs in the outback in a remote Aboriginal community called Belgo from a friend that we had lived with in Wellington, who had become a teacher and moved there and to teach. And 2 youth work jobs are coming up, and they'd wanted people that were experienced because it was the first time they'd had youth workers. So they needed people that could really sort of, I guess, set the foundation for something. And they wanted a male and a female. So my friend was like, I know the people. And initially we said no. And then one day my wife made me a cup of tea and said, I think I'll never regret going to Belgo, but I might regret not going.
Mm.
And in that moment, it was like, okay, well, we're going to do it. Like this is, we've made most of our major life decisions around just like a feeling in our gut,
Yeah.
which it could be the Holy Spirit or it could just be the cup of tea. I'm not sure, but
Yeah. Sometimes that's the same thing.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, we're like, yeah, let's do it. And so my wife found out probably would have been 9 years ago or something. So when I first met her, she said, oh, she's quite fair skinned, but she said, oh, my brother's a bit darker than me because we're part Spanish.
Right.
And my granddad's really dark because we're part Spanish. And then, so her granddad was like one of 11, grew up in foster home, doesn't really, grew up disconnected
Mm.
from all his family. And it makes complete sense now. We don't know how he didn't see it or whether he knew it and just didn't want to say it. But one of his cousins found him and was going through the family tree.
Mm.
Found him in his sort of late 70s and said, well, this is the Aboriginal side of the family. And it was like, what do you mean Aboriginal? I'm part Spanish.
Wow.
They told me I was Spanish in the foster home.
Wow.
And yeah, it was so for the family at first it was like, oh well, that's interesting, but I think the more that it sat with Jenna, the more it was like, actually, this is the sad history of our country in Australia, that they literally bred it out of people. And
Yeah.
so they said once someone, if their mum was half or their dad was half, after that they could be taken and raised European and, completely removed from culture, from family, so yeah, there's that we've sat with the last little while, and we haven't been, and this is our first time living in Australia in 8 years. And so yeah, that was really the driver for us, was a chance for us to connect with that side of her, and really reconcile our relationship with Australia. To be honest, after being in Nauru, both of us were like, F Australia.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why would we, looking to start a family and stuff like that? It's like, why would we raise them in Australia when we could raise them in Kohanga in New Zealand? It was just like, there's like, it seemed like the two countries were worlds apart. And so it's just been really healing for us to be here to reconcile our relationship with Australia as a couple, as a family, and for her to sort of dig deeper into who she is, that deep part of her that I think Indigenous peoples and Aboriginal people have a God-given purpose to care for their country. I think there's something that exists within their wairua, within their spirit, that I think was just sitting there in Jenna, but hasn't, a piece of her spirit that couldn't find rest.
Yeah.
And I think for the first time we're sort of moving towards finding that. So yeah, it's been really healing to be here.
Cool. That's awesome. And you get to do some fun things like going hunting with the chief.
Yeah. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. We're really, really remote. So the closest McDonald's is a 9-hour drive. The closest barber's shop is like a 7-hour drive. And the closest sealed road is like 3.5 hours away. So like we're quite remote.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of hunting. There's a lot of wild animals. There's thousands of wild horses. So it's pretty cool to just drive around in a 4-wheel drive in the desert and chase wild horses and catch the odd one. People take them home. And I don't know. It's just like, it's literally another world out here. So yeah, it's a real privilege to be here and a whole lot of fun. And a lot of that fun has been the healing stuff.
Oh man, there's so much we could keep talking about, but unfortunately we've come to the end of the time. I guess just to finish off, looking back at all of that, what are you most grateful for about this journey that you've been on with the youth work, the justice work, the advocacy? What is it that when you look back on it, you go, man, I'm really stoked about this?
Yeah, one thing that I'm really grateful for is looking at, in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all else will be added to you. Don't care for the birds, all that stuff. And then I heard someone say, that the Greek word for righteousness there actually could be translated justice as well. And to me, that just made total sense. And so essentially that's what we've lived by is, seek first the kingdom and his justice, and everything else will be added to you. Everything you need will be provided. And we've never once been in need, but we've always prioritized justice.
Yeah.
And, in the big and the small decisions we make. So I think that's the thing I'm the most grateful for, is knowing that essentially in losing my life, I'll find it, cool. That I'm just like, like Jesus was for real. That's the sort of thing that I'm like the most grateful for. I'm like, this isn't just fluff. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love how right through your story, you just highlighted again and again there's the macro level stuff, the big stuff that actually can change with a whole lot of people getting together and having a voice in that. And then there's the micro stuff of what can I do today?
100%.
You know, what I can go and have a cup of tea. I can play chess with someone. I can give them dignity of treating them as a human.
Yeah.
And so often I think we don't do the big thing seems out of reach. So we don't even contemplate the little thing.
Yeah.
But to do the little thing and then know that actually lots of little things contribute to a big thing is really encouraging. Oh, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate that. Appreciate you sharing your stories and your heart for people. And thanks for what you're doing to help to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Yeah, cheers. All good. Glad to be a part of it.
Hello, hello heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
In a system that was stripping people of their dignity, I could do the little bit that I could to bring some dignity in that moment. You know, it's people like James who inspired me to start this podcast. He gets it. He can't change the whole world, but he can help to change the world for someone. He can use his life and his skills to make a difference for those who have had their dignity taken from them, who have had their hope stolen from them. I'm sure James would be the first to agree that we don't all have to go to Nauru to do this. We can simply ask ourselves, what opportunities are there in the spaces we occupy to love others? How can who we are and what we have make a difference in the lives of those around us? So James, here is a blessing for you. May the rhythms of your life keep pounding to the beat of justice, just like the music that inspired your journey. May you know the kindness and generosity of others in your life as you continue to live a life of kindness and generosity towards others. As you spend time with people on the margins, may you find yourself at home, knowing that you are exactly where you're meant to be. As you and Jenna continue to work and live in ways that give out to others, may you also receive, receiving faith, hope, and love, that you can continue to serve as you do, and that your relationship with one another and your future together would flourish. And may you both continue to find healing from that which you have seen, experienced, and felt. And lastly, may you continue to see the small things that you do make a difference in people's lives and do damage to the systems that oppress them. And in those moments of change, may you again know great joy. Thanks to Strahan for the music and Rangi for the karakia. Thanks for joining me on this episode. Join me next time when I talk to Dietrich Sorkai about youth work, poetry, child advocacy and culture. Until then, me inoi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia. Engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino.